Unfortunately, bad things happen on the water to our equipment. It's inevitable when we're fishing for muskies. They're a big fish, we're fishing hard. Things are going to happen to our gear. Rods, reels take a ton of abuse in the process of muskie fishing. There's nothing worse than being on, say, your big Canadian trip, your big weekend trip, and your gear goes down. So I'm going to show you some quote-unquote bush fixes or hillbilly fixes to keep you on the water. Obviously, if you have a rod or a reel that's warranted, you need to consider that, but this will keep you in the game. Say you're on that big Canada trip and you go, oh, my number one rod went down, or my reel, whatever it might be. This is going to keep you in the game with some common issues that arise. First off, reel seats. What's going on with a rod, regardless of manufacturer, is this reel seat where your reel actually physically sits is epoxied to a rod blank. Okay, so in the construction process, the way a rod is built, they take this rod blank, they slide everything up this, they epoxy the cork on, or whatever EVA, whatever material is on this rod, it's going to be slid up. So this is simply epoxy to the rod blank itself. It's a common fault, regardless of manufacturers, that after a little use and abuse, these things can spin around. It becomes very frustrating. I've had it happen on trips. A lot of anglers that spend enough time in the water have had this happen with a lot of different brands. It just happens based on hot, cold. You can take this hot environment, cold environment. This epoxy is going to weaken. So what I want to make sure that we're going to do, first and foremost, is we want to make sure before we do this repair, we get that reel seat lined up using, say, like the logos on the rod or your eyelets as close as you can. Sometimes if you're lucky enough, you'll feel where the epoxy originally was and sort of get a catch point there. But line it up to the absolute best of your ability. Always have electrical tape. I fix top water baits with this. I actually pin the hooks on my bucktails with electrical tape. It's faster than faster than heat shrink and handy. So I'm going to line that guy up, and I'm going to come in here and do a little electrical tape just to hold things tight and snug. So as I'm working on it, I'm not getting any more motion. So that's going to bind that to the cork. And so now we have a stationary reel seat that we can do a quick bush fix on. I highly recommend, if you're going to Canada or you're doing a big trip, hey, it's my 3-day trip or whatever it is, I always travel with a drill, a cordless drill in the boat or in the truck. Also too, if you're taking your truck, impact driver is always handy dandy to have for quick, bigger repairs. But always have a cordless electric drill. Don't go to Canada without one of these. You're going to need it at some point in your muskie career, whether we're fixing a bait or we're fixing a rod or reel. So what I'm going to do for this reel repair, obviously with your drill, you want to have a set of drill bits. But I'm going to take a piece of bucktail wire. Now, I've been on the boat and had to take a bucktail and snip it apart to get the bucktail wire to get this repair done. I'd rather sacrifice one bucktail to keep my rod in the game, to keep fishing through the rest of the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a bucktail wire and obviously the appropriate gauge drill bit to make this trick work. Okay, so we've bound our rod. You'll find on the majority of reel seats there's a divot here or an impression. I'm simply going to take this drill bit, get inside that impression, drill down 3 of those. All right, I'm going to follow that up by grabbing, say, Avid Angler glue or super glue. Always have super glue on your boat. If you're fishing soft plastics, you're fishing different tail baits, always have repair glue. I'm simply going to take this super glue and feed some into that hole, right? And take my bucktail wire, get it lined up there, force it up and down a little bit, let that set for just a few moments. And for speed on camera, I'll just cut this close here. Repeat the process down the row here. And you're pinning this reel seat. So we've drilled through the rod blank and we've planted 3 posts in here when we're done. All right. You can pull your electrical tape off and you'll see that this critter is stationary as they get. Now, this is not something that I want to, I mean, this will last forever if you want, but, if you have a warranty on a rod or something of that nature, deal with it when you get back and say, hey, I had to do this to keep this thing in the game. So now that's just dried up, and that will not go anywhere. Obviously, we want to come back with a flush cutter. You should always wear safety glasses. Cut those bad boys off there. You know, spread that little glue there, if you will, whatever. It's going to dry out. Now you have a real seat. No matter how much pressure I put on that, that is going nowhere. You're back in action. You're back on the water. You've got a bush fixed rod that's going to be ready to rock and roll. I'll grab another one here, and let's say we really don't have a drill, or we don't have these other elements available to us, okay? And we just have to, we got to keep fishing. We're in Canada. We've gone to the Bay of Green Bay. We're somewhere. We just got to make it happen, okay? This is an ugly one, but it'll keep you fishing. You can come behind here. I try to do it somewhere where it's not going to bother me so much. And you can actually remove cork material from the back side of a rod, right? And that's going to allow you access up under that reel seat. Take a little mend it, take a little angler's glue, super glue, feed it in there, hold it steady, and you'll get some glue under there and get that thing to set. Like I said, I want to drill this out. That's a far better fix, but if you had to, take your super glue, get access under that reel seat, glue it back to the blank, and you're going to be back in the game. Something that happens quite often is tip breakage. You know, here's a nice high-end rod, and the tip broke, okay? It happens to the best of us. No matter what brand, it's going to happen. It could be your car door. It could be a big muskie on a figure 8. Things can go awry. So, we're on the water. We got one rod. We got one setup, or it's a setup that we need, and we got a busted tip. This is the original tip off this rod. Not everyone's going to sit around and go, oh, I have a pack of wonderful rod tips from the Musky Shop ready to go. It's not something that many people keep in their boat. Let's say we break this tip off, right? So first thing I'm going to do is prep this rod. I've already gotten ahead of it just a little bit. With most rod, there's threading. It's actual thread, like you would sew with, a higher quality, but it's just thread that's wrapped. That's how they apply the reel, or excuse me, the rod eyes. So I'm going to take a box cutter or your pocket knife. You're going to have a knife on the boat. You can use whatever knife is handy. I'm going to work down some of that threading, okay? And scrape that off and sort of prep this surface to get this tip back in action. I think, obviously, I did a little prep work before we filmed this. And I've got the majority of that threading off. So I've got a clean surface. Don't cut yourself now. Anyway, so I've got this area that I can work with on this rod tip. So in a perfect world, we would have a spare rod tip in our tackle box or somewhere in the boat, but most of us don't. So I've got the old rod tip that's broken off of this. How do I get it back on? How can I keep fishing? So, hillbilly fix here. Always have your drill and some drill bits in the truck. What I will do is I'll take a drill bit, find one that fits inside of this, right? And start working with my hands the fiberglass material out, right? And I'll sit here and take my hands, and you'll see there's fiberglass starting to come out of this bad boy, right? So I'm going to work this as best as I can. Sometimes it's so packed in there, or the tip, the adhesive, you can't get through it. You could use your drill. Make sure you don't hurt yourself. Don't do something stupid. You know, put this in a set of vice grips or something and drill down into this tip. Clean out that material. Now you have your original tip that you can usually feed on the rod again. Boom. What will happen is we're working this out, this material, and we'll inevitably get this cleaned out. So you've got the old tip pulled out of there. I can do it really quickly with a drill, but like I said, if you don't have a drill on the boat, you should. All right. And we don't want to do anything dumb. We should probably not hold this directly in our hands, but look at me go. And you'll see the material coming out. That's the old tip that's still inside this rod tip. All right, knock it out. And this is going to take you a minute, right? So in the spirit of thrift, let's say we've drilled that out. We've got all the old material out of here. Slider on, you're back in the game. Okay, you can use, there's Angler's Resource, there's hot melt glue. This is probably your preferred methodology to replace a rod tip. Keep some in the boat if you need some. You know, we're doing a bush fix here. Mend it, super glue. Hit some super glue on this bad boy. Make sure you have a good game plan on lining her up. Super glue it on there, you're gonna be back in the game. You can do the same thing if you keep extra rod tips around. Slide that bad boy on there. We got a clean start, right? Pretty simple. Doesn't get easier than this, doesn't get sloppier. Little super glue. Again, this is not the preferred way, but we're on a musky boat right now in Canada and we got no other options, right? Slide your tip on there. The tip, say the tip you just cleaned up. Sight it in down to the first line there, or to the other eye. Hold her there for a second. Get your fingers unfurled. You're back in the game. You got a fresh rod tip on this rod. It's going to keep you casting until you can get home and get a professional repair or replacement. And that's just a couple tricks with rods. Reels. You know, these are expensive investments that take a beating. You know, this is an Abu that has been beat pretty good. It's still working well, but people run into things on the water all the time with their reels. From experience, what I'll tell you with these super reels, don't go opening them up on the water. Unless you understand the schematics, you understand how this thing's put together. A lot of times people open up a reel and they end up with a hot mess. They end up with a plastic bag and they go, what do I do now? Okay, cover just a couple common things that will happen with super reels regardless of brand here. Jay, if you come in here, this is your worm gear. This is your drive gear, all right? This is what helps the line gather across this reel. There's an item under here called a pawl, P-A-W-L, pawl. That runs in this gear. So as we turn the handle, that worm gear moves the pawl, which sends your line gathering across the face of the reel, and then it reverses just because that gear is designed to do so. When this stops moving, and that's a very common thing that will happen, typically it's the pawl of the reel has worn out or is chipped, okay? So again, not many of us are riding around in a boat with a pawl, okay? Unless you're with Steve Paul.
Bingo.
Always one for a pun. So we'll come under this reel, or get up under this reel. And I'll knock this out. Hopefully I don't lose it. Right, well, it's right there. There's a small washer. You'll see a small brass washer here. And the pawl is underneath that, right? I can knock it out of this reel but for the purpose of this video, we won't. What will happen, that pawl is U-shaped. It's meant to ride in this gear. So that worm gear is here and the pawl rides in it, obviously sending that back and forth. When that wears, the pawl wears, you get skippage or slippage right there. If for a quick bush fix, what you can do often at times is find something that will fit in this area, right? So whether we cut down the tiniest part of a water bottle, right? Or we cut down something, if we have a washer handy or anything that we can get to force that pawl more forward, that'll usually get you through a day or a trip if you have to. Obviously, you can just put it in that hole and replace the cap and crank it down. Now, that's an ugly fix, but it has saved me a couple times on reels that I needed to work, and you just get that wear and tear, and inevitably it never happens at the best time. So, like I said, using this cap that they use to retain the pawl, just putting a material, whatever you have on hand. I've cut down, like I said, pieces of bottle caps. I remember one time I cut a piece off of a blade fuse, right, and just got a little piece of metal that I could jam in there and stack two of them in there, and it saved the day. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Another interesting little thing is people will get upset. You'll gouge these handles, okay? And this is just cool. This is just a tactile thing, but a lot of these EVA handles, you can smooth them back out. Let's say your buddy drops your rod or dings it. You know, there's a little ding there. You can sort of work them out with a lighter. So you should always have like your torch for repairing rubber baits Always have some super glue on hand, parts and pieces. I have a repair box in my boat that's a Plano, and I just keep a few different weird items in there. I don't really keep reel parts, but just things that you could theoretically need. If you fish one brand of reels and you're continually fishing it, you know, an extra handle and an extra pawl is probably not the worst thing to have on board, just because those tend to be the things that wear out. When it comes from a reel maintenance standpoint, before you start your trip, always check you have a screw here that retains the locking nut or the screw down for your handle here. Always make sure that screw's in place. This is probably goes against what manufacturers recommend. I've had tons of these vibrate out after excessive use. This one tiny screw, it's a very thin screw. I will hit it with just the tiniest drop of super glue on the side of it to keep it from vibrating out. Not so much that if I need to work on this reel that I can't get it out, but just enough that it'll, you know, keep it from vibrating out during the course of fishing. That's going to be a handy trick. As far as reel maintenance, the classic thing of backing your drag off, if you're not fishing that reel, is a pretty good idea. But a lot of times we'll have to get into reel maintenance. And let's say your reel's just simply not running well. You're like, it doesn't feel good. What can we do without getting into the belly of the beast and doing more harm than good? What can we do to get through a day of fishing? So the vast majority of your super reels are going to have a nut or a screw here on the side that allows access to the gearing, okay? So we would simply take the screwdriver, get this bad boy out, and of course if you're on a boat, don't take it all the way out, take it out finger tight here so we don't lose it. And you can knock that out. They're a little pesky to get out at times. I'll actually use this piece of bucktail wire to get it out. These can be real pesky and tight, okay? So that allows us to access the gearing of the reel. I can't really think of any of the super reels that don't have an access point here. So you'll see that the gears are here, your brass gears. What you can do if you want to get your reel smoother, if it's not feeling great, it's feeling a little crunchy, you can do one of two things. You can hit it with some precision oil, or you can feed some grease in there. Your choice, right? Grease is probably going to be a better option for your main gears if you don't have it. And again, I'm not talking reel repair and maintenance. I'm talking bush fixes, or you're on the water. You got to make it do with what you have. I hate to say it, I've blasted WD-40 down there before just to get through the day. But understanding that you have that access point and not being afraid to open that up and feed that in. If you're feeling that reel's feeling a little crunchy, it just doesn't sound good. It's not feeling good in your hand. Also, and it just depends on your manufacturer on how we access the side plate. With the Shimano Tranks and a lot of these different reels, these will pop off, the side opens up. You can lubricate your bearings. So the bearings on your spool, when you take the side off, you'll see the side of your spool. There'll be a spool bearing. That's a great place to hit with just some precision oil there if you're having an issue. I don't recommend, however, doing too much reel maintenance. And I differ, I think, from a lot of people on that. Most guys will have a lot of time over the winter where they want to clean their reels, they want to tear them down, they want to do everything humanly possible to get it as quote-unquote smooth as they can get, right? What I recommend is leave them alone. Clean them, take you a pipe cleaner, use a pipe cleaner and clean the gears out, or your worm gear, I think is going to be the most important thing, and put a little bit of light lubrication in there. One thing I've seen guys do that I think is probably the kiss of death with a lot of reels is they'll get in this worm gear and they'll just pack this full of grease, right? They'll pack that worm gear with grease and they think they're doing themselves a favor. This is an exposed gear by its very nature, and you start picking up debris. Grease will hold debris, whether it be sand, especially in the north, you get sand flinging off your line, or you'll get weed, and now you have grease that's retaining that. That's what wears your pawl down on your reel. I like to use like a light lubrication. I don't know if it comes to viscosity when it comes to these things, but like that Abu Garcia reel oil or a Daiwa reel oil, and just lubricate that with some regularity and keep it clean. That's probably the biggest thing you do, is take a pipe cleaner, come up in this area and just brush it back and forth, roll that gear over, brush it back and forth, and just get that nice and clean, keep it lubricated. That's going to alleviate a lot of problems on the water for you. The other thing that I'll say with super reels that happens while we're on the lake, we click this down and it doesn't come out, right? Your free spool, your lawn bar, your thumb bar, just is sticking. Happens all the time. If you're stuck down here, usually it's a matter of it's not lubricated enough, right? So you have springs, you have some tensioners in here. If you can get a lubricant in here. Spray it in there, hose it out with some WD-40 or some light oil if that's what you got on the boat, or whatever the bush fix is. Get some lubrication in there, and a lot of times that'll free it up and keep it from sticking, right? If it's plain stuck and it won't turn at all with the handle, going to be a different issue. But if you got a sticky thumb bar, little lubrication in through those holes will usually save the day for you. Guys, it's tough out there on the water. It's a rough life if you're a musky guide, and it's a rough life if you're going on the weekends, you're going on big trips. Be prepared to make repairs. That's the biggest thing I can tell you. When it comes to your lures, your lines, your leaders, be prepared to make repairs. Have some tools on hand. Have a drill and some drill bits. If you need to fix some rods, have some tools on hand. Always have the appropriate reel tools, or you know, whether it be the Shimano tool I keep here on my keychain. Have the tools around to fix these reels, screwdrivers on your boat. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's going to help you stay on big fish longer, and it's definitely going to help you put a big fish in your net.